Do you know what time it is? It's supernatural story time. And if you're easily scared, and even if you're not, there's only one thing left to do. Just turn off the lights, because these are stories that you listen to only in the dark. It Waits, Volume 7, Story Number 1. As a touring bar musician in the 80s and 90s, I had many an occasion to stay in different hotel rooms. Thankfully, strange events were extremely rare, but the only one I ever had guaranteed I would never forget it. On a Sunday afternoon, our band's school bus pulled into Melville, a small town in Saskatchewan. I believe it was the Melville Hotel, and proceeded to load in our equipment. After we had set everything up, I located my room on the third floor at the end of the long hallway and found it odd that it had two entrances, one to the bedroom, which was located at the end of a small hallway, and the other located at the main hallway, which opened into a small sitting room, which then led to the bathroom and then the bedroom. While washing up, I heard some strange noises emanating from the bedroom, but I attributed them to the old steam heater. I locked up both doors and went for dinner with the rest of the band at a local restaurant. During dinner, I tried unsuccessfully to convince the other band members to come to the movie theater down the street. Most towns we played were too small for a theater, and it was a treat to see a movie. In this case, St. Elmo's Fire was playing, and while definitely not my first choice, it was better than watching the CBC in black and white on the TV in my room. Returning to the hotel, I walked up the 3 flights and turned the corner toward the long hallway where my room was located, which was at the end. As the hotel was quite old, the hallways were extremely wide, not like hotels nowadays. I distinctly saw a woman, most likely a housekeeper, walk into the hallway toward the entrance to my bedroom. When I turned down that hallway, I noticed my bedroom door was open, although I had locked it before I left, so she must have gone into my room. There was no one in my bedroom, but there was also another room located just before mine down that same hallway to the bedroom entrance, so I assumed she was in there. As that door was ajar too, I knocked on there and hearing no one, I peered inside to look for her as I needed more towels. The room was very small and no one was in there. There was no bathroom in this particular room. Thinking the woman must be in my sitting room, I unlocked the door to discover she wasn't there either. As mentioned, this was an old hotel, and when someone walked along the floor near you, you could hear it. Still thinking I had somehow missed her, I washed my hands and prepared to go to the movie. Then I heard the strange noises again coming from the bedroom. I walked into the bedroom, and as I listened to the steam heaters, the noises, which were a low mumbling sound, changed direction, emanated from the sitting room. That's when it hit me that it was really strange that I didn't see the woman anywhere. So being a natural hero, I got the hell out of there as fast as I could and went to the movie, which bored the crap out of me. When I returned, the band was also returning from a long night of sitting at dinner. My brother complained that his door was left open even though he had locked it before, and sure enough, my bedroom was unlocked even though I had locked it when I left to go to the movie, albeit in a big hurry. We were going to rehearse a little bit in my sitting room, and so I began setting up some of our equipment for a bare bones practice session. As I prepared the equipment, the lead singer and his wife came to the room to help me. After a couple of minutes lost in the preparation, I realized that they were no longer in the room but standing outside in the hallway. I asked them what they were doing. The lead singer, who was 6 feet 4 inches tall and 220 pounds, answered, "I can't stay in your room. It's got a bad vibe in there. I don't like it. There's something really wrong in your room." Both he and his wife absolutely refused to come back into my room. Practice was canceled as I had the only extra little room, and everyone decided to go to bed. Except me, of course. I was entirely too freaked out. The next day, when I returned to my room after lunch, my bed was made and towels were left on my bed. I didn't think anything of that, although usually the maids didn't touch the band's rooms until the end of the week, because we're notorious slobs. I thanked the lady at the front desk, the co-owner of the hotel, for sending someone to clean my room, but mentioned that it wasn't necessary. She just looked at me and asked me what I was talking about. She literally had no idea. I told her about my clean room and the towels, although I had asked no one for them. She said that her daughter cleans the rooms on Sunday mornings and doesn't return until the following Sunday. I told her about seeing the woman go into my hallway, and she had no explanation for that or my clean room. She laughed and said the guys in the band were playing a trick on me. I tried to explain that first off, the guys in the band knew I was terrified to be in the room in the first place, and the last prank they pulled was cleaning my room and bringing towels to me to scare me. They would have been much more cruel than that to my delicate psyche, and secondly, they wouldn't be awake for another few hours. She just shrugged and didn't offer anything else. My room was made 3 times that week, not every day, and no one else's was. After I realized that whatever it was wasn't out to harm me, but rather make me pretty darn comfortable, I had some of the best rest ever in that place. And yes, the lead singer and his wife never did come into my room again. Next story. My family has endured a lot of tragedy and death, but our strong bonds have kept those departed from our family very, very close. My grandfather's house is a depository of every family member that has passed, with the dominant entity being my grandmother. It started when my Aunt Gloria passed away when she was 15 years old. I was 6 years old at the time, and after the funeral, they turned a small wall in the house into a type of shrine. I remember my grandparents looking at the picture every night and going through her items, including locks of her hair. As young as I was, I remember smelling her in the house. After a while, it got to where everyone would just say hello to the picture when they came. My grandmother passed away next, and that is when things started to kick in. I was 18 at the time, and I was living with my grandparents to help my grandpa take care of grandma. She was very ill, and the last time she left the house to go to the hospital, she told me she wouldn't be back and to take care of things. She was right. A few months after she passed, I had let a friend from work spend the night. She slept on the couch downstairs. I came down the next morning and she was drinking a cup of coffee. She said that she found it perked already and asked who the lady was with the red hair. I didn't put two and two together until much later. My friend said she was wearing a white uniform and she was in the kitchen when she woke up. Well, I thought maybe one of the old nurses had come by, perhaps to pick up some equipment. I went into the kitchen and all the cupboards were open. I didn't think anything about it. I just closed them. I took my friend down into the cellar, and she pointed out a picture of a woman and said, "That's the lady right there." She pointed out a picture of my grandmother on her wedding day. I kind of flipped out a bit and told her that that picture was almost 40 years old and she had passed on. I could see by the look on her face she was sure that this was the woman. I talked to my grandfather that night, and he, a devout Roman Catholic, pointed out that Grandma had been in the house. He talked to her all the time, and even now she still forgets to close the cupboard doors. Their grandmother was a cook at a restaurant, and that was the white uniform my friend saw her in. A few weeks later, my grandfather went out of town and had a party at the house. I invited a few friends and my cousin Michael. About 2 hours after the party started, Michael, who now owns this house, ran down the stairs, out the front door, and got in his car and took off. He didn't even put his shoes on, and it was the middle of winter. He called me when he got home and told me to go upstairs. I did and was astonished to smell roses, but there were no flowers in the house, and the funeral incense all over the upstairs. My guest also smelled it. It was unbelievably strong. As soon as I cleared out the house, it went away. She obviously did not approve of my party. Several years went by, and then my mother passed away. Every time you went in the attic, her hope chest would be opened up. My grandfather remarried, but his second wife was very uncomfortable in the house. In fact, I moved away to Houston, and when I came back, the house had not been changed at all since my grandma passed away. When I commented to my grandfather that nothing had changed, she said she won't let it. In succession, his 2 other daughters passed, a son-in-law passed, and then he passed, all in 8 months time period. In fact, we had 3 family funerals in 6 weeks. This was in 2003. The day we buried my grandpa, his second wife hightailed it out of the house and even left some of her clothes there. She said she knew the house didn't want her there. It was always my grandmother's house. My cousin Michael bought the house from the estate, and he currently lives there. He said all kind of things go on in there, and his dog is always spooked. He'll never forget the day he ran out of the house. I go there all the time, and I can feel everyone in there, and to this day at least, one of the cupboards is always open in the morning. My grandfather was the last to leave us and enter into spiritual residence there, and he passed after he buried all of his daughters and his beloved first wife. The love and bonds that held them all together in life is still holding them together, now in that house that we celebrated our family. I miss them all very much, but I feel like they are all in the house, so I shouldn't miss them that much. Next story. My husband and I had just gotten married in July of 1995, and we shared a similar background of believing in spirits. My husband had been told years before that he had a female spirit that was attached to him that followed him around. I take it now that she did not appreciate him getting married to me. She did not trust me for some reason. I didn't know about Anne. That's what I felt that her name had been at the time that we got married. Well, we did not have an actual bed in the bedroom and slept on a futon in the living room for 3 months. When we finally got our bed delivered, everything seemed to be okay until we went to bed that first night. As we lay down to go to sleep, I happened to look at the foot of the bed and saw the outline of a woman standing there looking at me. My husband was between me and the door, and I literally clawed my way over him to get out of the room. The figure was very clear to me, and I could tell that she was wearing a very long floor-length gown, and the collar completely covered her throat. Strangely, though, I couldn't see her face or make out any facial feature whatsoever, but I knew that she was staring at me. My husband asked me what the problem was, and I told him. He couldn't see her, but I refused to sleep in the bedroom. I did not like going in the bedroom alone, and I refused to sleep in there. We have a friend who is a pagan, and she told us what to do to be comfortable sharing our space with her. My husband was in the kitchen one evening cooking dinner, and I was folding clothes in the bedroom when a cigarette lighter was thrown over my shoulder from behind me. I asked my husband why he threw the lighter at me, and he came out of the kitchen and told me that he hadn't. A few nights later, I was watching television, and I had turned to say something to my friend, and I saw her standing in the doorway to my bedroom. I was so terrified that I stopped talking. My friend Debbie asked me what was wrong. I told her about the things that had been happening, and she said not to be afraid and just to talk to her. So the next day, I started talking to her, but every time I went in the bedroom, I could tell that she would follow me around the room and was constantly watching me. A few months later, we found out that I was expecting a baby, and I was really frightened for my unborn baby. As the time grew closer for me to have my daughter, I started having strange dreams, and we had cleared out our second bedroom in preparation. One night I had a dream that Anne came and stood over me and was looking at me, and I could finally see her face. She was a very stern-looking woman, but she also had a tenderness about her. She walked around the bed, stopped by my husband, and touched his head. All of a sudden, it was like I was walking behind her and following her for once. She walked out of our bedroom, and then instead of turning and heading toward the front door, she turned and walked through the baby's room door. At the time in my dream that she walked through the door, there was a very loud bang that came from what seemed to be the other side of the door. It was so loud that my husband and I both woke up, and he grabbed a baseball bat and went into that room and checked it out. I was still in bed and looked at him and said, "Don't worry, honey, it was just Anne." He said, "How do you know that?" "She's been in here with us." I told him about my dream, and that I truly felt that she was finally okay with me. After that, we never knew she was even there. We have since moved and have had no further encounters with her. However, I do miss her. I feel like for a brief time we knew about her, and then she just left us. I just hope that in some way I managed to help her with whatever caused her to stay. Next story. There was one morning, it was after my husband Felix had left for work, and I went back to bed. I had gotten up for some tea to help my throat and the stomach ache. I went back to bed and went to sleep. I had a dream that I was at my grandmother's house, present time, and my grandfather came home from the hospital. The thing is, he died several years ago, but I never actually saw his body. Anyway, he came home and I was told He still had cancer and had been expected to die years ago, but he just went on living. My grandmother explained that they had only told us he was dead because they didn't want his children to see him suffering for so long. I was like 11 or 12 when he died, and the oldest of my siblings. So I wanted to find my grandfather to talk to him. I asked where he was and was told that he was outside working in the gardens. I was like, what is he doing? He's ill. He shouldn't be doing that. So I went out to help him, and then I talked to him. I asked him why he let me believe he was dead for all these years and then came back home. He said that he missed us or something. I can't remember exactly, but that he wanted to be there for me. I said to him something like, how can you expect everything to just go back to the way things were when I barely remember you? I only remember little pieces of life when you were here before. I don't know really exactly what we talked about, but it was along those lines. Then he felt bad and came over to me and put his hands on my face. At that point, I woke up. I was about to start crying again, and I wasn't sure why because I really wasn't sad. So I woke up. I was still half asleep, just starting to wake up. My eyes were still closed, and I felt a hand on the left side of my face, stroking the side of my face and head. I thought for a very, very brief moment that Felix was home from work. At this point, I was completely awake, and I could also feel a hand on the other side of my face, too. I opened my eyes. When I did, I saw for the briefest moment the outline or shadow of a person standing over me. The person's arm reaching over so the hand could be on the left side of my face. I only saw the person's form for a short moment, but in that time, I could tell the person was tall. Both my husband and my grandfather are very tall. I also knew it was a man because I could feel the hand. I felt the hand on my left side most was a man's hand, larger, the fingers not as thin as a woman's. Anyway, I was so afraid. All of this happened in less than a minute. For a moment, I was unable to move. Then, still terrified, I turned away to the left. I sleep on the right side of the bed, and the person was standing on the right side of the bed. As I turned, I felt the man's hand move down to my neck. I had a sudden, faint fluttering or spasm type feeling where the hand had come to my neck. I'm not sure if I imagined it or not, and I felt like the man was trying to choke me. However, I was sleeping with a scarf around my neck, so I think the pressure that felt like strangling was from my scarf, but at that moment when it happened, I hadn't realized I was wearing the scarf, and I just thought the man was trying to choke me. As my fear increased, suddenly the man vanished completely. He was gone, but I was still so afraid. I wanted to get up and call Felix, but I was too afraid to move. Then I started thinking about what happened. Remembering the dream, I thought maybe it was my grandfather or maybe it was a totally different person. And rather than the dream being related to what happened when I awoke, maybe my dream was influenced by what began to happen just before, or as I woke, because in the dream when my grandfather put his hand on my face, and when I awoke to feel a man's hand stroking my face, these two things happened simultaneously. The other possibility that I thought of was that something bad had happened to Felix, and it was him in spirit. After some time, I fell back asleep. Later, when I awoke, I called Felix. He was fine, so it wasn't him. It was either my grandfather, most likely, or someone entirely different. When I called Felix, I told him what happened. I'd been thinking about it for some time, and then when I told him, I got all emotional, like speaking it out loud made it more real or depressing or something. And after I finished telling him that, I just started crying. And the thing is, I don't even know why I was crying. And I asked myself, was it my grandfather? Or did I want it to be him? Or was it a complete stranger? And maybe that supposed caress would have led to something far, far worse if I hadn't woken up. Next story. I've lived in my apartment since about 1994. My husband was disabled with a disease called myasthenia gravis, which makes you severely weak. He went through a major depression about 5 years before. We're no longer married. I remarried and still live in the same apartment. During his depression, he wouldn't come out of our bedroom. He stayed in there in the dark and just listened to music. I started waking up and seeing a green glowing face on the wall. At first I thought it was a dream. Then I started seeing what appeared to be words, always at night, and I would waken suddenly. I never said anything to my child, who was about 7 at the time, but one night he told me to please leave his nightlight on because he was waking up by seeing a green face that appeared on his wall. I started praying and told my husband to pray also, although all he did was curse God for being so cruel to him and disabling him at such a young age, which was 22. We later divorced because of his negativity. When he left, it left. At least it seemed like it. The atmosphere in the house seemed to be light and calm. Even guests would comment. Then I got remarried about 2 years later. My husband and I would fight about the silliest things. It felt like pure chaos in the apartment. I soon started to be awoken again in the night, but it took on a human form. One night I woke to see what appeared to be an old man with white stringy hair, bald on top, just staring right at me while I slept. I still get chills thinking about that face. Then I would have things move, such as my baby's bottle. I would set it next to me on my nightstand for when he awoke to find it gone. I turned on the light, but nothing. My hubby and I looked everywhere just to wake 2 hours later to have it sitting right beside me in its original location. Now my hubby and son would hear it. They couldn't help but not hear it. Severe banging in the walls. But for the first time my hubby woke to see the same thing I did. I was awoken to see the old man hanging upside down from my bedroom ceiling, hair dangling down as well. He had an old prison outfit that was black and white striped. My husband awoke and saw exactly what I saw. It stayed for a few seconds, disappeared, and then my bedroom door closed about the same time by itself. Lately, it's taken on a form of a bluish-green light that will eventually turn into a black figure. Not the form of the old man. I felt it touch me. It feels like electricity, as if you're being shocked. Sometimes a bit painful. The other day my sister was here and we were talking about it, and the banging started. It bothered her so badly she started to flee. I'm getting used to it though. I feel it has something to do with me. If I get upset or angry, I hear it the most. Then so does everyone else. I live in a townhome apartment, and the neighbor to my right is also having problems. She hears it call her name when she's alone, and every night at 11 p.m. her kitchen cabinets open by themselves. She mainly hears it coming from upstairs as well. So, is it her or me that's haunted, or was it something here that haunts the land long before there is even a building? Next story. I was about 12 years old at the time, my brother only 8, but the memories of that night stayed with us unbeknownst to each other until 10 years later. Here's our story. It was early August 1990. It had been raining on and off for a couple of days, leaving everything swampy and muddy. We were living in a 2-story triplex house on a tiny little street called Bixby Road, nestled between Cutler Road and Woodburn Drive in Litchfield, New Hampshire. At the time, we were occupying the unit on the left side closest to the dirt driveway that semicircled from Bixby Road to Woodburn Drive. It should also be noted that we occupied the middle unit too prior to moving into the one on the left. My mother had left that evening to play bingo, leaving me to babysit my brother until she got back. She had left through the sliding glass door facing the backyard, where she had parked the car, to avoid walking through our flooded front yard and extremely muddy driveway. At one point during that evening, my brother and I were settled on the couch watching that old Bill Murray movie, Stripes, on our VCR, when our movie was interrupted by a series of power outages. It had gone out and come back 3 times, with only about a second between each outage. This eventually left us watching a blank fuzzy screen and nagging at each other to walk to the TV and start the movie back up. There was no remote control. As we were displaying our extreme laziness and nagging each other, our foul-mouthed conversation was severely halted by a rattling sound. Our eyes followed this sound, and it led them to the doorknob on the front door. I remember a curious feeling building inside of me as my gaze focused on the movement of the doorknob, something my mind wouldn't catch until several minutes later. The doorknob shook back and forth violently for about 30 seconds, as my brother and I watched wide-eyed, awaiting for someone to open the door and come in. When it stopped, I felt that a prank was being played on us, so to ease my nerves and those of my brother, I started in my usual foul-mouthed manners to invite the idiot on the other side of the door to come in. Almost instantly the doorknob resumed shaking. It was about this time that my mind started to comprehend the curious belief that had built up inside of me. You can't reach the doorknob on the front door when the screen door is closed. From my viewpoint on the couch, I had an excellent view of our front stoop through the huge picture window on the front of the house. Not only did I not see anybody on the other side of the door, but I could also confirm that the screen door was firmly shut. Our ill-fitted aluminum screen door was not a door easily cracked or opened without a ruckus of noise either. Trying to hide my intense fear, I continued to barrage our visitor with insults. My brother followed my example. The doorknob stopped shaking. Actually, pause would be a better word, because what seemed to be at least 10 minutes, the doorknob would shake and then stop, shake and then stop. Sometimes it would shake for 15 seconds, sometimes 45 seconds. Sometimes it would shake lightly but visibly turning, sometimes it would shake violently. As my heart was racing, my mouth never ceased, and my eyes played back and forth between the doorknob and outside. With the help of our outside light, I remember searching for any sign of movement. Somebody above, somebody below, anything. My brother and I taunted each other to get up and open the door, but neither of us took one step near it. When about 10 minutes of this ridiculous behavior passed by, my fear began subsiding. With my courage rising, I declared to my brother and our visitor that I was going to open the door. As I began to stand up, my eyes never straying from my outside view, a sight stopped me in my tracks. Out upon our stoop, a lantern suddenly lit up the night and swung to and fro in the air. My brother and I jumped to our feet, yelling to each other, "Do you see that? Do you see that?" It extended our field of night vision by adding to the light pouring out from our window and from our outside light above the stoop. The light never exposed an arm holding the lantern, or a body for that matter, nor a rope or string to suspend it. And trust me, it stayed there long enough for such an examination. It did not shine an incandescent light like a light bulb would, but a fiery one. It blazed and swung as we beheld the sight. Eventually, as fast as it came, the light extinguished, and the lantern disappeared. A minute later, I ran to the door and finally opened it. The screen door was still tightly shut. I went outside and examined the front yard. No footprints in the yard, on the stoop, or anywhere around the front door. In fact, the only footprints that remained on the stairs and stoop when my mother returned were mine from re-entering the house. A horrifying revelation indeed when I found how easily I could make them. I don't think our mother believed us when she came home, but she was concerned. Inquiries were made around the neighborhood about visiting the house after the power outage. No one on our block admitted to the visit, and most importantly, no one had a lantern that wasn't electric. We moved about a year later. As traumatic as it was for my brother and I, no one seemed interested in the events. After a day had passed, none of us would speak of it until about 10 years later. Upon a visit to my mother's new house up north, I approached my brother with the subject. I was curious as to whether or not my imagination had exaggerated the incident over the years, but without prodding, his story was remarkably similar to mine. Interestingly enough, my mother, overhearing the conversation, chimed in with a few of her own experiences at that house. My mother is one of those late-night readers, and she claims that on several of those nights, while we were living in the middle unit, our neighbor's dog, who was kept in the windowless basement, would start yelping in fear at a certain time in the night. She never thought much of it until after our neighbors had moved. After the apartment had been emptied and vacant for a while, my mother would hear a baby crying at the same time of the night in which she had once heard the dog. She would investigate the crying sound and track it to the basement, only to have the crying stop by the time she reached the adjoining basement door. I live on the opposite side of the country now, but someday I hope to return and ask the recent tenants if they've had such experiences. Next story. This was a summer a few years back that I was house sitting for a friend out in Banks, Oregon. Her house was 5 hard miles off the main road and had a cemetery on one side and farmland on the other 3. There was also a barn in the back with pastures. I brought my Mustang, who had lived outside most of her life, and I thought was scared of nothing. This house was the first house in Banks. It was first a post office, then a school, and finally a house. Each aspect of its history is very apparent, as well as which parts were added on as its uses changed. The first night I stayed, I started feeling uneasy as soon as it started getting dark. I decided to go to bed early, figuring if I was asleep, I couldn't well be nervous. I went up to the bedroom, crawled in bed, and tried to fall asleep. I immediately started hearing footsteps up and down the wooden stairs, and I could hear the furniture in the kitchen move. I couldn't fall asleep, so I yelled, "Knock it off, I'm tired." I heard a huge bang, and then it was quiet for the rest of the night. I decided for the rest of the week I would have friends stay with me. My boyfriend stayed with me first. He didn't believe in ghosts, so every time we heard something, he would say, "It's the cat." When I showed him that the cat was sleeping on the bed with us, it was too small to make all that noise anyway. He just told me to go to sleep. I also had a friend who said he could talk to ghosts. He wanted to see the cemetery, but halfway there we started hearing the trees moving, and he swore he saw someone in the trees, and we had to go back. He then attempted to sleep in the old teacher's room. It was connected to the old post office and had its own bathroom. He went and closed and locked the door to the post office and then went into the bathroom to get ready to go to bed. When he came back out, the door to the post office was open and had a book sitting on the floor, acting as a doorstop. He grabbed the sheets and ended up sleeping on the floor of my room. Another weird thing happened while I was there. My horse would start screaming during the night, and when I would go out to check on her, she would be frantic and refuse to walk to the side of the pasture closest to the cemetery. There was a cement slab in the one pasture that was very odd. The owner of the house told me that she was told there was a building there, but had seen tons of pictures of this house throughout the years, and there had never been a building shown. This was just extra creepy because I was staying there when the bodies of Ashley Pond and Miranda Gaddis were found. Also had a friend that house sat for her, and ended up leaving with her boyfriend and his best friend when they couldn't get the light in the closet to stay off.